Building your own custom Nintendo Game Boy has never been easier. I'm going to show you how. Hi, welcome back to the shed. I'm Joe Bleeps, and today we're going to be looking at how easy it is to build your own custom Nintendo Game Boy in 2022. So I've been modifying and building Game Boys for almost 10 years now, and in that time it's become easier and easier. Parts have become more accessible and parts have become more advanced. Parts have become a bit more expensive as well, but we'll get onto that. So not long ago I bought a job lot of non-working, faulty, unloved, untested Game Boys and took them apart and tried to salvage as much as I could that was still usable from them. Now it's surprising just how much of these Game Boys survive. Even if you see one that looks like it's long dead, the parts that you really need are generally the parts that are often quite well protected. So if you've got an unused Game Boy sitting around that maybe doesn't work quite as well as it used to, you'd be surprised at how easy it is to bring that back to life and create something awesome like this. So in this video, that's what I'm going to show you. We're going to look at what we need to nurse these things back to life and make them awesome. So what we've got here is my latest build. Now at its heart, it is still an original Nintendo Game Boy. The hardware is still inside, but what we've got is a replacement IPS screen kit that comes with its own front motherboard, so that's all brand new. There's a glass lens to cover the screen and give a really clear view of the display. This has got a replacement shell. Now this shell is a custom one that is molded so it automatically fits the IPS screen kit inside without any cutting. I've kept the original buttons because they were in good shape. Even if you needed to replace those, you can buy those too. The parts that make it feel new are all there, but as I say, at its heart is still the Game Boy. So we're going to look at how you would go about building something like this and see just how easy it is. Alright, so to open up a Game Boy, you're going to need a tri-wing screwdriver, which has like a Y-shaped tip to open up the main parts of the shell. And then once you're inside, to remove the motherboards and so on, you'll need a crosshead screwdriver. So with those two, you should be able to fairly easily remove your rear motherboard. Now, I've got other videos which go into much more depth about how to take Game Boys apart. So if I remember, I will try and link one of those up here so you can take a look at those if you need to. But for now, we will assume that you've got your rear motherboard out from the Game Boy. This does all the processing, this runs the games. The front motherboard is actually going to be replaced, so we don't need to worry about that. But if you can, then test what works on this. We should be able to get power from the batteries. The audio socket for the headphones should work. The volume dial should work. You've got your link cable port here. You've got your power input there. And of course, the cartridge reader. If it's possible, then you can test those and make sure that they all work. But for the purposes of this video, we will assume that your rear motherboard is all in working order. If there's a demand, I will make a separate video that goes through how to troubleshoot these, so let me know in the comments if that's something you think might be useful. So in addition to the rear motherboard, the other parts I'm still going to be using are the buttons. Now we can buy replacements for these, but these are in fairly good shape, so we can use those all right. Same goes for the silicon parts. I've always found that although you can buy reproduction ones, the original ones tend to work best if they're still in good shape. Now the only other thing that you will need from your original Game Boy, if it still works, is the speaker. Now sadly for me, the speaker on my front motherboard is damaged. It's tested and it no longer works. So what I'm going to need to do is try and replace that. But while I've got the motherboard here, I will show you how you can easily remove the original Game Boy speaker. So if yours still works, you can attach it to your new front motherboard very easily. You can even keep the wires that are attached. So even if you've not done much soldering before, the soldering required for this job simply involves removing the original speaker and attaching it to the new board, which is surprisingly easy. All you need is a soldering iron. If you hold the wire from the back and suspend the board like this, just reheating that solder blob, you'll find that the wire drops out of the motherboard very easily because the weight of the board tends to lift it off. And there we go. So these are all the original parts that I was intended to use. Everything else is going to be brand new. So we've got the motherboard, of course, we've got the silicon layers, we've got the buttons and the D-pad and the original speaker. What I'm going to do is replace that with a new one that I've attached a couple of wires to. You can do this too, or you can actually buy ones now that are pre-wired. So depending on your preferences, those options are available to you. Oh, and quick amendment, because I forgot earlier on, we're going to need this power switch as well. So in addition to the IPS kits, which I have done a number of times before, the new bit that I found really interesting and exciting were these two here. First of all, we've got the shell. This is a Funnyplaying shell that's specific to the IPS kit. Before, what I would have had to do is take an original shell and cut the opening so that it was a little bigger and remove some of the screw posts inside. However, this is pre-molded with those openings and with those bits removed already, so there's no cutting required. The shell should fit the IPS kit in there perfectly. This other bit that I've got here is is an injection molded bracket that holds all the parts in place. Now this is fantastic because before we've had 3D printed parts, which are really cool, but this, the accuracy, the tolerances, they're just absolutely perfect. There's some very slight overhangs that grip the screen, so this holds the screen in place, it keeps the ribbon parts safe, and it just makes the assembly super easy. So this part, it was like about £5, and it was really money well spent in terms of making this job easier, locating the screen in just the right place. So that's all the bits. Let's take a look at the build. So we're going to start with the rear half. We're going to get the rear motherboard in place. Before that goes in, you need the power switch. Have that positioned over to the left. Then you're looking at this power board here, which will slot in on the left, and just watch out that these wires don't end up getting trapped in the edge of this screw post. So if we get those in place, we slot the battery connectors in. You should be able to get the whole thing to sit level. If the wires are causing a problem, just push those out of the way as you move it down. Make sure that your switch lines up with the cap there. Once that's in place, you'll be able to put a screw in on the left and the right here. So that's just with a Phillips head screw. It's a new thread in a new shell, so just be careful when you're cutting those in. Don't over tighten them because you don't want to strip the plastic. That kind of to and fro motion will cut your threads nice and neatly. That's in place there. So this next step's optional. It's up to you whether you do it. I'm just going to add in a couple of wires for what's called a Prosound mod or a noise reduction mod. It just gets rid of the hiss from the headphone amp. It does reduce the volume a little bit, but if you're planning on connecting to a mixer, or if that hiss is bothering you, or if you just fancy doing additional mods, then this might be for you. We're mainly concerned with these 2 points on the daughter board of the headphone socket area, and also these 5 little dots here next to the volume dial. I've got a diagram I like to use for that. 3rd point down is our left, and the 4th point down is our right. On here, the leftmost of the larger solder points is the left, and the middle one is the right. We also need to cut and remove these 2 wires that we've got here. So first, I'm going to prepare these 2 points with just a little bit of additional solder so the wire takes to them a bit more easily. Same with this, because this is decades old solder that we've got here, so I'm just going to melt it, add a little bit more to it, making sure that you don't bridge them, that you don't connect those 2 points. Just adding a little bit more solder to make that easier. Also, I'm going to use a needle file to remove just a little bit here so I can route the wires without them getting pinched. That's all that's needed. I just used a round needle file, and then I've got that where I can route my cables. I'll take my smaller screws and I'll screw this bit in position, and I'll use some wire cutters to remove these 2 black wires. My wires, I'm going to use red for right and blue for left. I'm going to prepare the ends with just a tiny bit of solder first. Just line them up with the dot where I'm going to place them. Reheat that, and it should merge together. With those attached, I just want to check and route them down to the bottom section and make sure I've got them to about the right length. Just cut those, strip them, and solder those in place. Again, just reheat the blob, feed the wire into it, and hold it there while it cools. So that's those 2 points all soldered, these 2 points soldered. Next job is just tidy up those wires. I'll just use a little bit of tape to hold those neatly in place. So that's the whole mod done. The wires neatly down in place, nestled into that section where I filed it out. I've soldered the ends of the wires to these 2 blobs, made sure that they're separate. I've soldered the other ends of the wires to these 2 points and made sure they're separate. And that'll be my Prosound mod done. So again, that's an optional one. It's up to you whether you want to do it, but it's a fun job if you fancy it, and the soldering is relatively straightforward. Right, so that is now our back half all done, and for when we're ready for testing, I'll pop the batteries in place. You're also going to need a cartridge to test it with. I've got one of these test cartridges. You can get those from game.uk amongst other people, but any game is fine for testing it with. Just something so you can check that it's reading the cartridges and that it's working. So that's the back half now all done, and everything is in place. So now let's move on to the front and our IPS install. So before we assemble everything inside this front shell, what we've got to do is attach our speaker to our motherboard, and you'll see that it's got these 2 solder points here where I can simply feed the wires through. You can solder on the front or the back with these, it doesn't matter. Let's just get one in place first, feed it through, bend it over, and the soldering process for this couldn't be easier. Just heat up the metal contacts on the board and the wire for a few seconds, add some solder, give it time to flow, and then it's done. Get my next wire in, feed it through, in place, lay it flat, heat it, add some solder, let it flow. So when that's all done, you've just got two neat solder points with the wires coming out the other side. If you've got any excess wire, you can just cut that off, but that's basically done. And although the wires are quite long, you can kind of rotate the speaker to get it in place when it's inside the console shell. So next up is our screen kit. Now the screen kit comes with the screen itself, a ribbon to attach the two motherboards together, and a ribbon to attach the screen to the front motherboard. It also comes with this foam adhesive strip, which is intended to hold the screen aligned correctly in the front section, but that is what our new bracket is going to do. So that adhesive strip we're not going to use on this build. The bracket is designed to fit in exactly the right spot. It locates in this section here, and these four holes locate on the front of the shell, so it is going to be perfectly in place anyway. We don't need to bother with any sticky bits, and that's good, because in the past when I've tried using the sticky bits, when you want to realign it and you try and pull it away, that's when you're running the risk of damaging this LCD, which of course we don't want to do. So the first thing we're going to do is attach this tab on the back of the screen to this tiny connector on the ribbon. So you simply need to align those. Now you can do it by feel and then just press with a finger and you'll feel it click in place. That is now my ribbon attached to the screen. So that is going to swing over there, and then it's ready to go into our new shell. We need to get the ribbon out of the way like that, but then this clips in place. Okay, so let's just try and get all that lined up. This is the best bit. These little tiny hooks, these little clips will just hold your screen perfectly in place. So that's our bracket with the screen perfectly located. Our ribbon, nice and neat there, doesn't need taping down or anything like that. Everything's safe. And then there's this little part which is going to come out and attached to our motherboard. So the buttons are going to go in first. I'm going to just lay down a screwdriver here to tilt it upwards slightly, which means that when the buttons drop in place, they're not going to be disturbed by the flat surface and everything will sit in place properly. I'll also put the silicone bits in place. There's little pins on the shell to help locate those correctly, and they should just sit neatly flat on top in place there. So at this point, your screen within the bracket is going to need to go in. So I've removed the protective coating from that, and what I'm going to do is just carefully turn it upside down. Now those clips should keep it located in place. Just check that it's still lodged in position in the bracket there. Just turn it over, carefully line up with the screw posts, and it should just slide onto those if you lined up correctly. Shouldn't be any force required at all. And that now is our screen held in exactly the right spot where we want it. So before we screw the motherboard down in place, because we'll get very limited movement on the ribbon there, while you've got that freedom of movement, bring your ribbon over, slot it in place. It should just drop straight in. If it doesn't, make sure those tabs are up so you can barely see any of the gold contacts. Then just pull those two connectors down with your fingernails or with a tool if you've got the right tool. So with my ribbon attached, I'll have a quick inspection behind, make sure everything's still in place. Our Funnyplaying bracket is correctly located. Buttons all in place, nothing's been knocked out of position there. Carefully bring the motherboard down and line up at the top. Get my speaker in place here, and just make sure everything is located and everything will push down firmly into position. Now while I'm handling here, I am being hyper aware that the new screen is in place and I don't want to be touching that at all. But my first two screws I'm going to put in place are these two central ones. Again, these are new screws going into new screw posts where there's no thread, so that forwards backwards rotation motion is going to help just thread those for us. Don't over tighten them. As soon as you feel it stop, it's done. That's those two in, which will make life easier for getting all the others in position, which is what I'm going to do next. Now it's up to you whether you put screws in these top two bits. That may apply more pressure to the screen, but if you don't tighten them too much, you should be okay. The most important ones are the 6 down here, which stop the motherboard being pushed away when we're pressing on the buttons. So I've just tidied up my speaker wire a little bit there. So now it's time to use this ribbon here to connect the front and back sections, which is traditionally my least favourite part of this job. The tighter fit is always going to be in the front, so that's probably the best one to do first, and then second attach to your rear motherboard with the other end. I'll just pop that out of the way for now. Rotate this in whatever direction is going to make it more comfortable for you to just slot this ribbon in place. So you won't really get away with just the gentle wiggle like you do at the top. What you may actually have to do is bend over slightly so you can get some purchase on this blue plastic strip at the back there. So I'll just bring it over slightly, line up as best I can, and just slightly wiggle to get that in place. That's gone in okay there now. And then the next bit is to attach to the rear motherboard, as that's going to swing around and go in place there. Easiest to do on its side, but be very careful not to let your fingers touch the new screen. Again, if I bend it very slightly, it's easier to get in position for moving upwards into that slot. Gently push in. Don't apply too much force because you don't want to damage the ribbon. So that's my two halves in place now, okay? And before I do anything else, it's time for a quick power on and just check that things are working. I'll make sure my volume is up. Power switch on. And there we go, we've got the volume working, video display all okay, perfectly located there. So that is all alright, it's ready for me to screw back together. I know I've not put the screen cover on yet, I'm going to do that a little bit later. But if I now start putting my screws in, I'll commence with these two in the middle. And this is where I'm going to need my tri-wing screwdriver. Again, fresh threads being cut as the screw goes in, and don't over tighten as soon as you feel it stop moving, stop turning. There we go, that one in that side. Just make sure that everything is located correctly before you start bringing those screws tighter, because sometimes bits might not be quite aligned correctly. Again, I'm not wanting to handle the screen at this point. Top one's next. Remove the batteries to get the last two in. Screws all in, batteries can go back in place. Battery cover on. And we'll take a look at the front. I've noticed there's a tiny little speck of dust. Don't be tempted to wipe that off with your finger. I have got brushes and things that will get them out of place, but if you try and brush it and sweep it, it'll often just move them to the edge where they might reappear. So if any little bits of dust have landed on your screen, like I've got one just here, I don't know if you can see it, a little bit of low tack washi masking tape is what I use. Just put it in a little bit of a loop like that and then just tap it on. Once you've established that that's all clear, then you can go to your glass screen lens and peel off the back, which is a bit of a scary ordeal because it'll remove the outer bit quite easily, but when it comes to removing the inner part, it's quite tricky to get it to come away. Now once the backing's removed, I always find removing this central section quite tricky. You don't want to get your fingernails under it because that might leave marks on the glass, and using a knife is possible, but I'm always scared of scratching the grey. I'm going to try something a little different this time. I've got a little strip of paper and I will put it down just here at the very edge because this is still sticky back, and then if I pull there it might just lift it away slightly. Just give us enough, there we go, just enough traction to pull that section away, remove all that sticky bit. I'll be able to just about get underneath there. Peel that away too. Always a bit of a tense job that, but provided you've got no dust stuck to the back of the screen lens, and check again that there's nothing on the screen itself, we're going to get that into position. I'm actually going to switch on, so with it switched on I can see the display and just double check that everything's lined up all right before I lower the glass part in. Hopefully it'll be a neat fit. Just needs a little bit of gentle pressure to put it in. Remember it's glass, so you don't want to force it. You can take a microfiber cloth so you can get a bit of pressure without quite as much friction from your fingers there to just push that into place. That's all located. We'll take off the front. Just check that it's level all the way around. And there we go. The bracket has helped keep everything just perfectly lined up. Looks absolutely amazing. We'll do a quick test because we've got the new speaker in there as well. So the auto test goes through everything. So the RAM test pass, press A button to begin, 3 different patterns. They're all okay. All buttons are okay. Press A and B for the next test, B to scroll. So everything's looking okay there. Volume's up, down, sweep up, continuous, and sounds all good. So that's all the tests completed, everything working perfectly. So our new screen display is with like the retro pixel look, so it's got like the pixelated look. This contrast dial on the side has now changed slightly. If we scroll it down and up, it will go dimmer or brighter, but if we press it, it should then change that, so we cycle through these different colors. Also, if we press it for longer, press it for a few seconds, it'll swap from that grid display to a clear, crisp display. You can still swap through the colors like that. So I'm going to finish by testing with a game. So Tetris is a really good one, not just because it's a great game, but also because on the main screen of Tetris, on the main title screen, the logo of Tetris has 4 different shades within it. See like that there? So you can take a look and see you've got the dark, the mid, the light grey, and then the clear at the top. So it's a great one for checking that the display of the Game Boy is all okay. So that is with the retro pixel effect, which is meant to emulate how the original Game Boy screen looked. Quite a difference in appearance. I think I prefer the solid, but the retro pixel, I do like that kind of throwback style to it. So let's have a quick go. So here's our end result. The heart of an original Game Boy inside a fresh new casing with a larger screen, lovely glass lens. The feel of this shell, not only did it make it super easy without having to cut sections out, the quality is really good and solid as well. Feels like a fantastic unit, and yeah, gonna have a lot of fun playing on it. So it really is easier than ever to create your own custom Game Boy with a very professional finish. Now I know the IPS screens have been around for a little while now, but having the custom built shell and the custom built bracket to go inside to work with that suddenly makes everything much more easy to get accurate every single time. So if you're thinking about giving it a go, now's a better time than ever. Of course, there's always going to be a downside, and mods are more expensive than they used to be. I suppose you do get what you pay for, as they say. And if you're going to do a build like this, in addition to the cost of the Game Boy itself, you're looking at £70 to £80 worth of kit that you'll need to buy for it. But you know, if this is the kind of thing that you want, then it's worth every penny. And the process itself is a lot of fun as well. If you've been put off doing mods before because they seem a little bit intimidating, this is a great jumping off point, and you'll feel like a proper expert putting something together like this. So yeah, I would definitely say give it a go. Loads of fun, and the end result is just gorgeous. So that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider leaving a like or a comment, and subscribe if you want to see more like this. In the meantime, I'm going to be playing on my Game Boy, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.